Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? I would like to join everyone who is joining us both in person and through our larger audience via the web and various other means. So thank you all for joining us today. All of you are welcome in the most open of all senses. It's great to see lots of faces, new ones, familiar ones, people who I see wearing name tags, but I don't know you, so it feels like you should be familiar to me, and hopefully we'll get to know each other. So it's so great to see all of you here today. My name is Daniel Cobb. My pronouns are he and him, and you are so welcome within this building. I would like to go ahead and move us on to our 8 principles video.
Number 8, active commitment to dismantle racism and other oppression in ourselves and our institutions.
I'm not sure if you all know, but our own Laura Keith King helped put that video together with the voices of various people from the congregation calling in to provide the readings for each of the 8 principles. So I love our new video. I think it's great. With that in mind, we will move on to the rest of the announcements. Very first, we have Nancy Hagman with a special announcement. Please welcome her up.
This announcement's exciting, and we can all do one of these things, okay? So you raise your hands like this, and you wrap them around yourself, and you pat yourself. This is a long time in coming, and not only a few people, but many contributed to this exciting thing that I'm going to talk about. You may wonder why we are missing this over here, or you're missing this here, or you're missing our recording in the back, because we have a new sound system. Yeah! And our new sound system will require all of our sound people to be retrained, which is really important for us to be aware of how our services are put together and the impact of our services. And there are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and the sound people generally do not get acknowledged. So they become invisible. But I want you to know there are people back there. Right now it happens to be Joe Vincent that's running our recording system. We will be recorded, and we are considering doing live stream, which really impacts our awareness of what goes on in the service, and being mindful to hold our comments and thoughts until after the service is over, and then directly speak to people rather than speaking out in the congregation. But I want to give a little bit of acknowledgement along the way. Our church remained steadfast through the 2020 pandemic due to dedicated individuals that provided live and recorded services. So we really have many thanks to lots of people, but I am going to acknowledge a couple in particular. Reverend Alice Silty was our part-time minister at the time, and she was committed to a weekly, either live or recorded presentation every week during that full year. And then we had Laura Keith King, who not only recorded, made sure we had recordings, but also got them onto YouTube. And Laura, I want to acknowledge you. Please stand. Laura is the driving force behind getting our recordings. She's the driving force bringing her cell phone every week and putting it here in these non-attached equipment anymore. But it really doesn't stop there. Erin Renfro, a previous member for the last year and a half or 2 years that she's been gone from our congregation, has received our videos and edited them. Very timely task if you've ever edited videos. I haven't, which is why I don't. And, excuse me, put them on YouTube each week. And Erin, we cannot say enough about Erin Renfro. And so I would love for you to clap in case she happens to hear this video. Erin Renfro. And of course it costs finances. And we had a wonderful, generous donor that passed away and left us the significant amount of money to be able to have the foundation so that we could upgrade the system. And his name is Rob Palme. Now, in the wisdom that goes into behind the scenes at the board level with currently Joe Vincent leading the board, past President Scott Satterwhite, and Laura Keith King prior to that, all had the vision that we would be able to do this in a much more simplified way. So it's much more simplified for us, especially if we realize that we have to hold our comments and our exclamations till after the service, but also so that we could have the wisdom to see far enough ahead that this could actually transform. So in some ways we can thank several people, and heaven forbid that we don't thank the 2020 pandemic, because it educated all of us in technology. Thank you.
We have a bevy of other announcements to work through quickly, but first I would like to start with a reminder to please set your devices, cell phones, anything else that might make little beeps and hums during the service to worship mode. Thank you. Sunday Sweets announcement. When church is over, don't rush away. There are lots of reasons for you to stay. Of course you know, it's Sunday Sweets Day. That's right, there are delicious goodies out there, and for those of you who are visitors here, you actually get one free sweet for free, so enjoy. We have some great bakers. We would like to let out a reminder that early voting starts on October 21st in Florida, so make sure to get out and get your voice heard. Fun and Fellowship would like to invite you to Bands on the Beach, Tuesday, October 29th at 7 p.m. We will meet at the Casino Beach Gulfside Pavilion to watch The Lads, which is a British invasion tribute band. Bring a chair and snacks and call Barbara Wright to RSVP or with any questions. See you there. To those interested in learning more about Project 2025, we will have Sylvia Lake here for the second hour on October 20th. So yes. please feel free to attend. Announcement about Halloween. So, the Heathen Kindred are once again organizing the Trick or Treasure Hunt, which will be October 27th, Sunday after next. And we need your help. We need baked goods, cupcakes, brownies, Rice Krispies, treats, etc. We will need people to stay after the Sunday service to wrap the baked goods, to set up the tables, and pile up the chairs. We need people to help at the event, which will be from 2 to 4 o'clock, people to staff the tables, to be ushers, to watch the hallways, to help Chris with the cakewalk and raffles. If you can help, please see Mark after the service. Mark, please stand up. That's the guy right there. So we got lots of great support last year, and the event was a smashing success. Let's do it again. Maybe if we acknowledge our Halloween well enough, we'll keep all the gremlins out of the sound room. On Thursday, October 17th, our church will co-host, along with the Humanists of West Florida, a screening of the documentary Bad Faith about Christian nationalism and our politics. Please mark your calendars and try to join us for the movie on Thursday, October 17th. The time will be 6:30. If you have not been contacted for a house meeting or have not been able to attend due to scheduling, please call Paula Montgomery. This is about Just Pensacola, of course. The house meetings are the listening portion of our justice work with Just Pensacola. In October, we listened to many members of our congregations to hear what local injustices we are affected by. In November, we will have a large meeting with other church congregations to hear what has been reported and to select the projects we want to address during this year. Then starts a period of study, preparing to present those injustices to the powers who can make changes. That presentation will be done at the big Nehemiah action this spring. We will now move on to some centering music provided by Mike and Ray. Thank you. We will now move on to our chalice lighting, along with our opening words. If you would, please turn with me to 611 in the dark blue hymnal. This is a call and response. I will speak the words in regular, and then the congregation shall read the words in italic. 611, Brahman. I am the self that dwells in the heart of every mortal creature. I am the beginning, the lifespan, and the end of all.
I am the radiant sun among the light. I am the mind. I am consciousness in the living.
I am death that snatches all. I also am the source of all that shall be born.
I am time without end. I am the sustainer. My face is everywhere.
I am the beginning, the middle, and the end in creation. I am the knowledge of things spiritual.
I am glory, prosperity, beautiful speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and forgiveness.
I am the divine seed of all lives. In this world, nothing animate or inanimate exists without me.
I am the strength of the strong. I am the purity of the good.
I am the knowledge of the knower. There is no limit to my divine manifestations. Thank you. If everyone would now stand, we will welcome the choir up to the stage to sing hymn number 328, I Sought the Wood in Summer, hymn number 328. Please remain standing for our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You may be seated. Thank you. Next, we will be moving on to the joys and sorrows. This is our opportunity to share the concerns and the joys of our life with each other, to join together in community. Nancy Hagman will help me by passing out the mic, and if you would, please come and line up on either side of the lectern, and we would love to hear what's going on in your lives right now. Our very first candle will be for all the concerns in the world. come to the realization just now how incredibly difficult it is to light lots of little tiny candles. So mad respect to everybody who does that. Real. Okay. We are going to move on to the time for all ages now. I had a fun idea that I hope relates to our topic. An important thing in life is to be able to find your self-sustenance, your joy, your ability to continue on within yourself. And part of that is the ability to find joy within yourself in whatever moment you happen to find yourself. So for our time for all ages, I would like to have Mike and Rivka provide us with a little music, and everybody.
Don't you mean Ray?
I'm so sorry. Yes, Ray. Yes, Mike and Ray.
I was about to say, we're definitely not married.
Yes. Mike and Ray, my apologies, provide us with a little music as everyone in the congregation, completely as your heart moves you, to just dance around and move a little bit. You can remain seating, you can stand up, just let it out and take this moment to find that joy within your life. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I'm glad everybody enjoyed that and found that moment of joy within yourselves. If you would now join me, we would like to go ahead and sing the children out to their activities. We will now move on to the offertory. We often speak about the 3 T's in this church for those of you joining us for the first time online, and that is your time, talent, and treasure. We certainly appreciate the time and the talent that all of our dedicated people bring to the table, but this is the portion of the service where we dedicate ourselves to keeping the lights running. So we will hear Mercy, Mercy, Mercy by our group here. Up next, we will have our message. I would like to introduce Thom Botsford. Before his recent retirement, Thom Botsford was a professor of English and Communications at Pensacola State College, where he also served as department head in the early 2010s. He is a longtime friend and occasional guest speaker at UUCP. His hobby, as many of you know, and if you didn't, you just found out, is playing the saxophone. Please welcome with me to the lectern, Thom Botsford.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning. I want to make sure that you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We'd like to start with a poem. This is our reading this morning. It's a poem about growing old. Terminus. It's time to be old, to take in sail. The God of bounds, who sets to seas ashore, came to me in his fatal rounds and said, no more. No farther shoot thy broad ambitious branches and thy root. Fancy departs, no more invent. Contract thy firmament to compass of a tent. There's not enough for this or that. Make thy option which of two. Economize the failing river, nor the less revere the giver. Leave the many and hold the few. Timely wise accept the terms. Soften the fall with wary foot. A little while, still plan and smile. And fault of novel germs, mature the unfallen fruit. Curse, if thou wilt, thy sires, bad husbands of their fires, who, when they gave thee breath, failed to bequeath the needful sinew stark as once, the bare-sacked marrow to thy bones, but left a legacy of ebbing veins, inconstant heat, and nerveless rains. Amid the muses, left thee deaf and dumb, amid the gladiators, halt and numb. As the bird trims her to the gale, I trim myself to the storms of time. I man the rudder, reef the sail, obey the voice at eve, obeyed at prime. Lowly, faithful, banish fear, right onward drive unharmed. The port, well worth the cruise, is near, and every wave is charmed. 1867, one of his later works, and as you can see, at that time of his life, he was trying to parcel out what I can do and what I cannot do, and to accept these terms. At any rate, our program this morning focuses on Unitarianism's leading lights in the 19th century. That's Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was inspired by a new book, Glad to the Brink of Fear, by James Marcus. It was published by Princeton and just out recently. Now, I suspect almost everyone has heard of Emerson. He's one of the big names in American literature, philosophy, and history. He's the father of transcendentalism, but I'm willing to bet that most people can't name anything particular that Emerson wrote. Am I right? Unlike his contemporaries, wait a minute, wrong one. I better ask you to do it, Joe. I'm not facile with this tiny thing. Okay. See, here are Emerson's neighbors, really. Nathaniel Hawthorne. We all know that he wrote The Scarlet Letter. And next slide, Henry David Thoreau, Emerson's neighbor. We know him for Walden. And next slide, Louisa May Alcott, We know her for Little Women. And by the way, Louisa May Alcott was the one who saved some of Emerson's papers from a house fire in, I think, 1877. But you see, unlike those literary neighbors, it's hard to know one thing that Emerson wrote because he didn't have one of those big hits like that, but he himself, I guess you could say Emerson himself was a big hit. And he is equally important as these others, if not more, as an intellectual influence in literature, in philosophy, and history. Now, in our own church, as we'll see, Emerson was a rebel. Where else would a rebel be but in the Unitarian Church, you might, and that's probably true. But he was a rebel, and he was raised in a Unitarian family. His father was a minister. His grandfather was a Unitarian minister. They were prominent, and so he got a gig at the Second Church of Boston as the minister. But he had to leave. He just couldn't handle it. He left in 1832 after his church insisted that he administer the sacrament of the Lord of the Last Supper, communion. He didn't want to do that. And just a few years later, in an address to the Harvard Divinity School, he proclaimed that, in quotes, historical Christianity is an empty vessel. That takes some guts. He wasn't invited back for 30 years, truly. His dedication to self-reliant individualism, that's what his reputation is, inspired one of his friends, fellow transcendentalist Bronson Alcott, to quip, Emerson's church consists of one member, himself, and he waits for the world to agree with him. Now, he was special. He was 19th century America's most notable essayist and lecturer. Now, those are not forms today that we just flock to anymore. If you run downtown and hear a lecture or read a long essay by Emerson, that's just not the modern taste. So, that partly accounts for his not having as much reach as some other figures. In the mid-19th century, though, he could pack a lecture hall, and even those who said they didn't understand him, and there were a few, they enjoyed hearing him anyway. Just they liked to hear him talk. In one New England town, a man boasted of attending 94 of Emerson's Lyceum lectures. He was on the early circuit of lectures up there that lead to things like Chautauqua later on. Well, today, am I wrong? It's a chore even for intelligent people to listen to a long talk. Is that right? Teachers? And who wants to read a long essay? And one reason is our attention spans are too short, and we tire of the repetition in 19th century prose. There's a lot of repetition. Now, a good writer will vary that repetition and make the point over and over again. Full of examples, figures of speech, long. And so it's a chore today for people to get through them, even though there are many fascinating points that he makes, and he makes them well. Fortunately, we don't have to read every single word of these essays. And for that matter, when you think about the words that Emerson left behind, I mean, he came from a group of people, they lived by writing. They wrote journals every day in detail. They wrote long letters to each other. And all of that saved, and all their journals and ideas saved us. And of course, since the death of Emerson, the scholarship is just take a long time to go through a lot of it. So he's a word person, but we don't have to read every one of his essays to appreciate their brilliance. I thought we would start with a passage that contains the title of his book, this book that I'm reviewing, and that is Glad to the Point of Fear. In Nature, his essay on nature, here we go. Crossing a bare commons in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to the brink of fear. And I put that in italics. In the woods, too, a man cast off his years as a snake his slaw, and of what period soever of life is always a child. In the woods is perpetual youth. Within these plantations of God a decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he could tire of them in 1,000 years. And we can move to the next slide. In the woods, he says, we return to reason and faith. There I believe that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, leading me my eyes, which nature cannot repair. And I've italicized this next part. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. Well, that's an astounding passage, and I think it gives us a good example of what a transcendental experience is. Notice that he had no premonition that he was about to experience this mystical consciousness, a sudden transformation, a disappearance of the ego, okay, and dissolving of the self into the cosmic whole. His image of becoming a transparent eyeball, there it is. This was a drawing that was included in one of his later books, but that amused many readers, and some found it just frankly ridiculous. But can you think of a better comparison for something basically beyond description? I'm reminded, this is like reading about a religious-induced ecstasy or a drug-induced ecstasy of some kind, when you don't feel that the boundaries of yourself anymore and you dissolve into everything else, and it's almost a state of bliss. Wouldn't we all like that at our command? Well, maybe that's a taste of heaven. Which brings us back to Emerson's departure from the Unitarian ministry. Now, note that his experience in the woods did not require a church. It didn't require a congregation or a Bible. The church he grew up in, Emerson thought, was too full of obstacles to spiritual experience. Churches were full of old and increasingly irrelevant forms, rituals, sermons, customs that distract us from full attention to the nature around us and hence to God. Do you want the peace that passes all understanding? In Emerson's view, don't look for it secondhand. You have to find it yourself. You won't find it in a book. You won't find it in the Bible. You won't even find it in church. You have to look for that direct experience. Direct spiritual experience is what he is saying. And you don't need any intermediaries necessarily for that. Now, this first book of essays that came out in 1841 was Nature. It was the title, and one of the essays was Nature, and there were some other great essays. It included a reflection on the relationship of language to nature and on the relationship of nature to spirit. And of course, now, Emerson is not a materialist. He did believe in God. He was really a pantheist, is what he. Well, he expresses his view here of nature and how to read nature in this little formula. Words are signs of natural facts. Particular natural facts are symbols of particular spiritual facts, and nature is the symbol of spirit. So when you think about it, everything we experience is not the deepest reality. It's symbolic of something more. So the goal of the transcendentalist is to interpret these natural facts so that they translate into something meaningful, into some wisdom. Now, as I mentioned, a few years later, Emerson was invited to speak to the Harvard Divinity School, but now you know, you must have a picture of all these distinguished scholars sitting in a room all dressed up to hear Emerson, but no, it was probably the fewer people than in this room. 6 or 7 people studying to be ministers had invited him, and they had brought their family and friends, and almost no one heard it. But that didn't matter. Emerson printed it up and made sure that people saw it. So, as I said before, he's a pantheist. Do you know what that means? We go back to the concept of theism. Christians are theists, Jews are theists, Muslims are theists. The belief of God as outside of the creation, intervening from time to time, but basically outside, separate from God. Whereas a pantheist thinks that everything is God. Everything, even the worst stuff. Now, this was disturbing to some people in Emerson's circles because you crossed into pantheism. Emerson says Socratic pantheism. Socratic, a reference to Socrates, because what did Socrates do? He asked questions and he drove people crazy. He never stopped asking questions. Question everything. Emerson too. Don't you give me something and say it's good. Prove. I have to find out for myself whether it's good. Really. But the view is, to the horror of the theists, that we're not separate from the creation, from God at all. We are pieces of God, part and particle of God, if we only would just see it. Now, let's look at some of the critiques of Christianity. This is the next one. Historical Christianity has fallen into the error that corrupts all attempts to communicate religion. Language just doesn't do it. As it appears to us and as it has appeared for ages, it is not, historical Christianity is not the doctrine of the soul, but an exaggeration of the personal, the positive, the ritual. It dwells with noxious exaggeration about the person of Jesus. Move to the next shocking paragraph. The soul knows no persons. Forget Jesus. The soul knows no persons. It invites everyone to expand to the full circus of the universe and will have no preferences but those of spontaneous love. But by this Eastern monarchy of a Christianity, which indolence and fears have built, the friend of man is made the injurer of man. The language that describes Christ to Europe and America is not the style of friendship and enthusiasm to a good and noble heart, but is appropriated and formal, paints a demigod as the Orientals of the Greeks would do. So Christianity, he's saying, is a glorified personality cult that misses the most important insight, that God is everywhere, inside and out, but we can't bring ourselves to see it. Now, this is an intellectual war, so don't imagine some huge cultural war within the Unitarian Church. Of course not. Most people who went to the Unitarian churches, they didn't really care about this. They just wanted to have a good service and all that kind of so Emerson didn't, conduct a culture war. He actually continued to be a traveling speaker, and he would go to Unitarian churches and speak. He needed a gig for a while, so some things worked out. And to be fair about the Unitarians of the 1830s and 1840s, they were, by our standards, far more enlightened than the other denominations. For one thing, they had rejected Calvinism. Puritanism is the best example I know of that. They'd rejected that. They've embraced scientific learning as they knew it. But, and I quote the author of our book, many Unitarians at that time continued to argue for the authenticity of the supernatural episodes in the Bible. Now, one of the most prominent Unitarian figures of that day was a man named Andrews Norton. He was called the Dean of Unitarianism. He insisted on the veracity of all biblical miracles except the virgin birth. He represented the values of many Unitarians and at that time, and let's face it, many people today still have to have these miracles. Well, whose vision, Emerson's or Norton's, would today's Unitarian Universalists prefer? How many for Norton? I would say Emerson's because of his open mind and his belief, and I mean it is a deep belief, and I share it, in the free and responsible search for truth. It's one of our core principles. He did reject the authority of the Scripture and insisted, this is important, on following one's own intuition, gut instinct, one's own conscience. And a very famous essay, early essay, Self-Reliance, he notes this, and this has been an inspiration to me many times. There's a time in every man's education. Now, folks, remember the 19th century, they just used man to mean any unidentified gender. Try to change it sometimes, but to change it all, you mess up the music and the flow, so we just realize this is older expressions. But it means everybody. There's a time in everyone's education when a person arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that the individual must take himself or herself, for better, for worse, as his portion, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to the individual, can come to him or her, but through toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to him to till. Everyone is given a unique plot of ground. Don't be comparing your plot to someone else's. The only competition is with yourself. Self-reliance. And he says, trust thyself. This will be the next one. This is famous. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Accept the place the divine providence has found for you, the society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. Great people have always done so and confided themselves childlike to the genius of their age. Well, the question might be, next one. Yeah, that's it, what I want. Whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist, or whosoever would be a complete person must be a nonconformist. Just because everybody else is doing something, why do they mean you have to do it? Emerson was famous for memorable, colorful language, metaphors, sparkling gems of thought. But you have to go through the long essays and you'll see some of them here and there. Here's one of them just in time for Halloween. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. If you think you always have to be consistent, that's foolish because things change. So to criticize someone for being inconsistent is not something that Emerson would admire. With consistency, a great soul has nothing to do. Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow speaks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you said today. You shall be sure to be misunderstood. Is it so bad then to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates, and Jesus, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every poor and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. You see, he has the gift of language. Now, such a complicated person, so many things we could say. We haven't yet mentioned his struggle with social issues of the day. He had a reluctance to devote himself to social issues for a long time because he found many of the reformers were kind of monomaniacal in their emphasis, only interested in one thing, and they got on his nerves. And since he was halfway famous, some of them would come tromping to his door, and some of them were pretty way out. But even the abolitionists of that day, they got on his nerves. It took a long time before he came around. Originally, Emerson had the view that a majority of the whites, even in a place like Concord, Massachusetts, had. They found slavery abhorrent but they still assumed that people of color were inferior to white counterparts. And you can go back and you can read what Lincoln said. You can even read what William Lloyd Garrison said. This was a common thought. Emerson, I think, evolved out of that, if you look closely through the years. So finally, he had to speak out, particularly when we're talking about laws like the Fugitive Slave Act, which forced people in free states to return any runaway slaves to their owners. So why did Emerson hesitate for so long? I found this explanation interesting in the book. As a transcendentalist, he still hoped for a revolution in consciousness, which meant that all the world's evils would be essentially self-erasing. Slavery, in this view of things, would simply collapse under the weight of its own wickedness. That's pure idealism, isn't it? And I think he realized it. But that's his original inclination, and that may be why some people are not always hesitant to get on the bandwagon. They don't like the tone and the style of the bandwagon. They would rather have another style. Well, Emerson educated himself, really educated himself as much as possible, consulting the best evidence he could find, including a massive volume, The History of the Rise, Progress, and Accomplishment of the Abolition of the African Slave Trade by the British Parliament, a massive book that was used to help end slavery in Britain. Well, buttressed by this data, Emerson took to the podium on August 1st, 1844, to denounce slavery and all of the bad things associated with it. But he couldn't find a church that would allow him to make the talk, and conquered. He had to go to the courthouse. And he noted the hypocrisy of that. Here's what he said. If any mention was made in our churches of homicide, madness, adultery, and intolerable tortures, church members, they would let the church bells ring louder, the church organ swell its peal and drown the hideous sound. The sugar the slaves raised was excellent. Nobody tasted the blood in it. The coffee was fragrant. The tobacco was incense. The brandy made nations happy. The cotton clothed the world. What? All raised by these men and no wages? Excellent. What a convenience. The slaves seemed created by Providence to bear the heat and the whipping and make these fine articles. Now, if you don't hear the sarcasm in that and the disgust in that, I need to read it to you again. His remarks were dynamite to the abolitionist movement, especially after the speech was reviewed favorably in the press and published in a pamphlet. And now even Emerson, who personally disliked the emotional excess of social reform movements, was now admitted to the abolitionist fold big time. And he was reasonably well known, so his remarks had clout. He is remembered today not for his foolish thoughts about racial superiority as a young man, but as one of the leading voices of the abolitionist movement. Now, one thing that we hadn't said much about is the personal side of Waldo. Waldo is the name the author calls Emerson throughout the book, because that must be what his friends called him. So it's Waldo. It's an effort to humanize him, and I think it works. I recommend this book for the library. It's easy to read. It's fun to read, because instead of writing in the completely dry scholarly style, it's written in the first person, and this scholar inserts his opinions here and there. And also, instead of covering Emerson chronologically, my heavens, he picks just 8 or 9 areas and capsule and gives you enough information to appreciate these dramatic aspects of his life, such as his relationship to Unitarianism, such as transcendentalism, such as social justice issues. But I hadn't said much about his personal life. He was married twice. His first wife, Ellen, only 2 years, died of the consumption, tuberculosis, which was a horror at the time. And, they didn't know what to do about it at that time. And then, not many years later, he lost his 5-year-old son, Waldo, to scarlet fever. And he was still a young man, and that's how grief comes into this and his approach to grief. he struggled with grief, and that because he wanted to show more heart and passion in the face of these losses, but he found himself cold. He grieved the fact that he could not grieve enough. But as the author points out, that kind of reaction is a kind of grief in itself, and he held it for the rest of his life, too. Famous for the optimism of his early transcendentalism, the older Waldo pondered the darkness of human experience and, in a sense, accounted for it for looking beyond traditional good and evil. This is the last point I want to make. He illustrated his budding pantheism in the poem Brahma, a reference to Brahman in Hinduism. Don't know why Emerson didn't put the N on there, but he did. Brahma. Brahman is the all-encompassing deity, the origin of everything and everyone, including major deities such as Shiva and Vishnu. Brahma is eternal. And yes, the killer and the victim are both one. All oppositions are resolved. Friends and enemies, the lion and the lamb, good and evil, it is all one. And it's expressed in this poem, and it'll be our concluding poem. Brahma, the great god, speaks this poem. If the red slayer think he slays, or if the slain think he is slain, thou know not well the subtle ways I keep and pass and turn again. Far or forgot to me is near, shadow and sunlight are the same. The vanished gods to me appear, and one to me are shame and fame. Remember, me is Brahma. They reckon ill who leave me out. I am the doubter and the doubt, and I the hymn the Brahmin sing. The strong gods pine for my abode, and pine in vain the sacred seven. But thou, meek lover of the good, find me and turn thy back on heaven. And with that mystery, I will say, good morning. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Thom. Now, if the congregation would please stand, we are going to welcome the choir one more time, and we are going to all sing a hymn. You should have papers on your chairs, and the words will be up on the screen. This is How Do You Have Faith, written by Rifka and Mike, but performed by Mike and Ray. So.
Most of my existence here is extra
Our closing words come from the blue hymnal, number 679. Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourselves as the only lamp. Go now in peace.